Coach, we appreciate you coming back on the show. First, how are you?
Doing great.
Good.
Fired up to be here. Season's right around the corner. I think it was a terrific offseason for us, and excited about the opportunities ahead for sure.
You know, when you walked in and we were kind of talking before we started, you said that when you came to Baton Rouge, when you were introduced as your first day you ever set foot in Baton Rouge. So now a little more than a year, right? Well, I guess, more than a year. What's it been like being here, you, your family, just adjusting in Baton Rouge?
Yeah, absolutely love it. People have been incredible. The hospitality, the great food. We were looking for something different and unique, and I think that's what LSU is. That's what Baton Rouge is, and I mean that as the greatest compliment. It's just such a special place. The passion of the fan base, the brand recognition that comes with those three letters across the country has been awesome. But one thing we do sometimes forget about in the coaching changes, it's a transition outside of basketball. And so that part with my family being comfortable and getting to meet so many great people, the schools have been awesome, sports teams for my kids has really been a blessing for us.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and get it out the way. Two of my former players are coming back to play for you.
I was going to leave those to you.
Probably the two best players in the history of the Dunham School. I'm beyond excited that they're going to come back to play, not just for LSU, but for you because of the relationship we've developed. But can you speak on, not obviously just those two guys, but just the experience with building the roster again and how effectively you guys have used the transfer portal? You may even want to get into a couple of your recent commits, the 4-star guys that you talked about. So just kind of expound upon that a little bit.
Well, first off, those two guys you mentioned, Carlos Stewart, Jordan Wright, incredibly well coached coming out of their high school ranks. And, so I'll give you a great compliment there. But no, I think this was, as we know, a very unique opportunity coming here from the standpoint of in April going into year one, no players on the team, no foundation in place. Everything had already left the program. So you're literally starting over, and year one was about just completing a roster.
Yeah.
Year two, recruiting cycle two, through this new era of college sports, the ability to use the transfer portal to try to get older, more experienced, proven players. We wanted to really take advantage of that, and I thought we were able to do so and sign in a top 10 portal class, headlined by two of those guys we just mentioned. But it's half our roster. We six guys out of the portal. We were able to be very selective in who we took. We wanted to target guys out of the top 9 leagues in the country. All won 20 or more games on their teams last year. Multiple 1,000-point scorers, multiple all-conference players. And the final piece of that is a lot of Louisiana ties in the class, with 4 players out of the portal coming back to Louisiana, plus the addition of Corey Chest, who was the #1 high school player in the state of Louisiana. Thought that was really important in trying to establish the new foundation of our program moving forward.
Yeah, and I don't want that point to be missed because we obviously a lot of people that live, we're based in Baton Rouge. A lot of people are familiar with what happened at LSU whenever you took over the roster. But just to reset, literally all 13 scholarship players left. Like you had 0 scholarship players. And you had to rebuild that roster. And now I'm curious how you would compare, contrast the challenge of rebuilding year one to having whatever amount of a foundation built after one season in year two. How was that similar? How was it different a year ago to year two?
Well, I think one of the big differences when you look at our 13 guys, 7 of the 13 are in their 4th or 5th year playing college basketball.
This season.
Coming up, correct. So you're older, you're more experienced. The challenge still remains they haven't played together. They've all had different experiences all over the country. And so you're still trying to build a team. But I would much rather be building that team with guys who have been an SEC player of the week, have scored over 1,000 points in their career, have been an all-conference player, have played in the NCAA tournament. Those type of experiences, I think, was important for us to add to try and fast track this process.
So I'm sure you've given some thought to this. I mean, I know you go a million miles an hour. I mean, you have to in this profession.
Yeah.
And it's hard to, I think, I don't want to speak for you, but sometimes it's hard to just stop and think in context, right? Because you're living through the windshield, not the rear view. But have you given any thought to what the challenge would have been like if you didn't have portal, NIL, like the current culture around intercollegiate athletics to try to rebuild this program in the roster?
I really haven't, because you could look at it one of two ways. You'd say it'd be impossible, but then the flip of that would also be there were some really good players that had already gone into the portal when I got here that you would have inherited from Coach Wade's last and final team here. So I really haven't thought of it that way, just as I haven't looked at, obviously, last year. I wish I could have created a better culture to where we could have maxed that team out and maybe won 4 or 5 more games. But we didn't get it done, and so I learned from that. And I'm just not one to really live in the past. You know, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. How do we best move this program forward and find ways to establish a winning program as quickly as possible? We knew through the portal this past spring that was a necessity. And what I hope we've been able to do now through that top 10 portal class is get more stability in the roster to where now – to Coach Pixley's final question, we're able to go out. The NCAA investigation is complete and final. The sanctions have been served, and go recruit the best players in the country out of the high school ranks, and have been able to do that so far this fall, and would like to add one more to this class as we head toward the early signing period.
So, okay, obviously you've coached at a high level for a long time, but having coached in the SEC for 1 year, okay, what did you learn that maybe you weren't really aware of or maybe as focused on that when you came away from the season? Okay, granted, you had to scramble to put a roster together. Anybody who looks at last year and judges your coaching ability on that absolutely has no clue about basketball, okay? But when you came out of that season, okay, there were things that you obviously have learned, all great coaches learn from every single year, that caused you to target certain types of players in the portal. What were you looking for specifically whenever you were, I guess, digging through the portal to see what was available?
Yeah, I think the obvious answers are the Hall of Fame coaches in the league. The SEC over the last 4 years has had 16 more NBA draft picks than any other league in the country. So you're talking about an incredibly high talent level. But the things that really stood out from a basketball standpoint, the rim protection in this league, unbelievable. I mean, I know people talked last year, the SEC didn't have a great shooting year per se, but I think a lot of that is due to the elite rim protection and then the defensive schemes. This is probably, of all the leagues in the country, the league where the most switching takes place. And so really tried with that in mind to identify versatile players that could both switch on the defensive end and then offensively take advantage of a lot of the switching concepts that you see in this league.
Can I go back just for a second? You mentioned the NCAA investigation being over. How difficult was that to recruit against? How often did that come up? I would imagine it had to.
Oh, it was very challenging. I think we were in a little bit different situation than Kansas per se. It was coming off a national championship. I know they were under investigation, but a Hall of Fame coach, national championship, and so forth. We're in a situation where you had 0 players and that long, enduring investigation hanging over the program. So obviously people were using that against you. So it's almost like having the death penalty until you get your ruling, because it does scare some prospects away. So very thankful to have that in the past and now feel like you can really move forward and recruit at an elite level here at LSU.
You had the coaches use that against you? No, come on, man. Like you'd actually run into that in the recruiting trail every now and again?
You know the way the business works. But, that's so we were looking for players. I think that was part of the reason as well to use the transfer portal to get some older guys, to get some guys who were going to come back and really tried to model similarities of what Coach Kelly did with the football program, getting some Louisiana guys back, the success that Coach Mulkey and Coach Johnson had with the portal of getting older, proven players. And so I think that's going to bring us a lot of stability to our roster and become the foundation of the program going forward.
I do want to ask you about Pix's pupils. Jordan Wright coming in from Vanderbilt and Carlos Stewart, obviously coming in from Santa Clara, two Baton Rouge guys who you go and recruit back. I'm curious because whenever we talk about recruiting through an NIL lens, and I know we can't, all the semantics of everything, but what was it like recruiting two Baton Rouge guys? I'm like, what was their recruitment like? Two Baton Rouge guys who had gone and had great careers elsewhere and having the opportunity to come back.
Yeah, both unique. I think with Jordan, a guy who's been in the SEC, SEC Scholar Athlete of the Year 2 years ago, SEC Player of the Week a year ago after the big road win at Kentucky.
Oh, yeah.
So a proven commodity there. And I think the sell of here's an opportunity to come back home and represent your home state. That's one thing that's been pretty cool about being here at LSU. Being the only Power 5 school in the state and seeing the pride that the young players take in coming to LSU and representing the state university has been cool to see. So with that said, he's also a guy only 1 year, his value extremely high. So you're talking about a guy who really could have gone anywhere in the country to play his final season. So it means a lot to me that he trusted us to give us the opportunity to come spend his final year here. Carlos is a guy whose value extremely high as well because he has 2 years remaining of eligibility. Averaged over 15 a game in the West Coast Conference, which obviously had Gonzaga and St. Mary's and two of the top 20 teams in the country, and his ability to shoot the three at 40%. I've told Coach Pixley also it was very refreshing when he came on his visit to see what it meant to him to be back in his hometown. Really his first time being on campus at LSU, to tour all the facilities and to see everything. And what it meant to him, the smile on his face, was really awesome to see. And so excited about both and the impact they're going to make right away.
Along with those two guys and several of the other guys, schematically, and I told people till I was blue in the face last year, if you know anything about basketball, watch what he's doing offensively. Watch the amount of just really good stuff that you run to get good open shots. And the ball just didn't go in last year, right? You have guys this year who are supposed to be able to make those shots, but do you change your approach schematically based on the talent level, personnel? Like, what are Tiger fans in store for from a standpoint of how you plan to approach each game with this team?
Yeah, I think you have to always be evolving. And, we start talking about those. We have 7 guys in their 4th or 5th year in the program. We have 4 guys playing their final season of eligibility here this year. It doesn't do me any good if they figure out some complicated system in February. Right. So we need to fast track this and build to our personnel. And, we all know the value of the three-point line in the game today. You have a lot of teams that half their shots come from the three-point line. So the ability to shoot it well from behind the arc, the ability to defend it becomes so key. And when you talk about Carlos and you talk about Jordan, versatile, can guard multiple positions on the floor. Carlos, a guy who shot at 40% behind the arc. Jordan was low 30s. I think he's capable of shooting it at a lot higher percentage. Even you go to Will Baker at 7 feet, 250 pounds, I would argue he's the most consistent shooter on the team. A guy who shoots it, over his career 39% from behind the three-point line. So we try to be very intentional in that ability to shoot the ball from behind the arc, and then obviously the ability to create those three-point opportunities for each other.
Specifically with this roster, how has NIL helped your roster? I'll leave it open-ended, not just necessarily from a recruitment standpoint, but just the opportunities that your guys have had.
Well, I think without it, you're not going to be able to recruit high-level players. And that's just the reality of the era we're in. I think that's the beauty of the LSU brand and the star power you see at LSU right now. And you're trying to capitalize on that as we build our program and show players across the country the opportunities they're going to have. I mean, look at what Angel Reese has been able to do, Livy Dunn, Paul Skeens, Dylan Cruz, Jaden Dan. I mean, you go down the line, Harold Perkins. The star power at LSU is the top in the country. Now, on top of that, you have the NILSU department on campus that does, I think, a tremendous job creating opportunities for our athletes, also providing the education that they need as they navigate these new waters. So I think it's a critical piece to what we do and how we'll be able to rebuild the program moving forward.
It's interesting that you mentioned a lot of athletes, even in other sports. When you are recruiting basketball players, how much will you use the opportunity that athletes in other sports have had at LSU when you're making your pitch to a basketball recruit?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, we have a video, and you talk about, you see one when Shaquille O'Neal's talking about it, and this is obviously pre-NIL, but he built his Shaq character here at LSU, and the rest is history. Now a billionaire. I think the star power here, the opportunities, the support of the community behind NIL is important. The fact that we've had 3 of the NBA's top 75 players of all time play at LSU, I think is important. There is a pathway to get it done at a high level here. And I think the success of all these elite athletes and other programs, obviously the national championships of Coach Mulkey and Coach Johnson, does nothing but help us as we try to fast track this process.
And the last time you came on the show, I know we had talked a little bit about the difference in NIL opportunities at Murray as opposed to LSU. But I'm curious, just year 1 to year 2, have you noticed any difference from Murray to LSU now into LSU year 2? Have there been anything notable changes or differences?
Well, I think what you see is, and you hope that as a program on men's basketball, we're able to follow some of these same pathways that the other sports and other athletes have followed, from the standpoint of, I know everyone gets caught up in these collectives, and that is important. But when you perform at a high level and you impact winning and you do that consistently, you see the opportunities to get opened up. Look at what Angel Reese has done. All the brands, that's true name, image, and likeness that her jersey is going to sell. Mm-hmm. When she puts her name behind a company or a business, it's going to help sell product. And so I think those examples are incredibly helpful when it comes to the recruiting world. I don't know much these NIL valuations you see, but I believe LSU has 7 of the top 100 in the country. I think the SEC holds down like 35% of those top 100 spots. And so I think all those numbers become very impactful in recruiting.
It's funny. I'm actually looking at it right now. Sorry, Pix, but Livy Dunn's 3. This is the on-3 valuation. Angel Reese, number 7. Jaden Daniels, number 14 on the list. Flauger's 21. It is kind of amazing, right? Like the concentration of athletes in all different sports that are at the top of this NIL 100, all in this one little footprint in Baton Rouge. It is a little odd.
I think, though, take Livy Dunn out of the equation, okay, because she was a star prior to, right?
Yes. Okay.
But everybody else, it goes back to what Coach just said. They're part of winning programs, right? And nobody is, as good a player as Angel Reese is, as good a player as Jaden Daniels is, like those things don't happen to the degree that they have happened unless they're part of winning programs.
Yeah, for sure.
And Coach, I kind of want to piggyback actually on that and ask this question. So obviously you can't, as a head coach, you can't walk into a recruit's house and say, hey, if you come to LSU, we're going to pay you this much in NIL. You can, however, make them aware of how the NIL program is set up, the structure of it, so on and so forth. But what you can't stop, and you don't even need to stop, is guys currently in your program talking about what they made last year or how they went about it and the success rate that they had. And so I guess my question is, when you walk into like Curtis Givens, the kid that you just the 4-star, right, that you just got, what percentage of the conversation is NIL based? And I mean, obviously, I think most recruits know that, look, I'm going to initiate this conversation and ask the question. Or is it still more based on, I want a pathway to the NBA, I want to go to the NCAA tournament. I want like just kind of break that down for us.
Yeah, it's a terrific question. It's something we talk about every single day in every staff meeting we have. And obviously I can't speak to specific prospects, but I think we'd be naive if we didn't explain that NIL is a huge part of this process now and will continue to be as we move forward in college sports. And so we're able to paint that picture and show the pathway here. And there's so many, I just named a bunch of them, incredible examples of people who have come in here and performed at an incredibly high level, have impacted winning, and because of their charisma and personality and how they conduct themselves off the floor, have become NIL stars across the country and even here at LSU, globally around the world. But I also think it's still coaching is still coaching in that regard. There has to be an opportunity. We have to be able to show the blueprint, show the ability to come in here and impact on the floor from day one. And hey, let's face it, one of the many reasons I came to LSU, we had lottery picks at Murray State. But here at LSU, you have all the resources you need to recruit the best players in the country who have dreams and aspirations of playing in the NBA one day. And it's been done here for a long time, players going on to the NBA. So I think our responsibility is help players max out their NIL opportunities while they're here at LSU, but also remind them if their dreams and goals and aspirations are to play in the NBA and they have a legitimate chance to make that happen, NIL is chump change compared to, for example, Ja Morant's 5-year, $195 million contract he just signed.
Is that good?
Not bad.
Is that a lot? Yeah.
I want to ask this question just with respect and understanding that you have to be careful with how you answer it. So I'll phrase it that way. But I'm curious your thoughts on how the semantics around NIL might be changing. Mark Stoops, the Kentucky head coach, recently said Georgia, they bought some pretty good players. Ball State's head basketball coach, Michael Lewis, said, quote, it's pay for play. You're starting to have coaches have being willing to be more open in how they discuss NIL. I mean, Pix and I, we talk about this all the time. It's like, I always feel when we're on the pod that we have to be very careful about semantics and how we word things, because we all understand, like, you can't pay a player. You can't, how it's structured. But it feels like some of the semantics around it, the way that these coaches are having this conversation, are changing. Are you noticing that at all?
Well, I think it's just the reality. I mean, let's take college athletics out of it. Let's say a company pursues you to take a job at their business. They spend 2 years building a relationship with you, laying out your plan, and say you'll make $100,000. And then this other company comes at you for a week. They lay out their plan in that week, but then at the end they say you can make $300,000 at our company. Where are you going to lean to go? And so I think that's some of the reality that we as coaches have to face in this new era of college athletics. Yeah, the relationships, the opportunities are important. But NIL, the people who love NIL the most, the coaches that love it the most, are the ones that have unlimited amount of money to offer out.
Makes sense.
And that's just kind of the reality of the situation.
Is it realistic that programs that don't have the unlimited budget can compete at the highest level?
I think so. I think it's more challenging. I mean, that's just, it's becomes a little bit like Major League Baseball in that standpoint. They don't have a salary cap. So I think it'll be interesting to see as we move forward. But if I look at the last 100 years of data, who's won the most in Major League Baseball? The Yankees, right?
Sure.
Who spent the most?
Yankees.
The Yankees.
Yankees, Dodgers.
Right.
Yeah, Dodgers,
Sure.
Red Sox.
Sure.
You know, who spent the least? Oakland A's. Moneyball. It's a great example that you have to use some, because there is not a uniform federal standard for how NIL works. There isn't a salary cap. All the state laws are different, so and there's no transparency. Nobody knows what the true amounts people are making are, and so it's going to continue to have a huge impact, and I think that's why you do see a lot of commissioners of Power 5 conferences and NCAA people trying to push for some federal and national standards for how it works.
Are you an advocate of federal or Congress putting federal standards in place?
I really don't know enough about it to say, and I'm not trying to straddle the fence by any means. I think it would be helpful. I think, number one, what has to happen, student athletes have to be protected, and I think that can be done through federal legislation. I think it's hard, though, when every state's working under different rules. And what's the power and regulation ability of the NCAA when it comes to the NIL? So I don't know what that looks like. It's typical NCAA. They opened up this deal with really no plan in place, and now we're trying to figure out how to manage it as we go. And I think that's what makes it so difficult. But I do think to have stability, there'll have to be some uniformity of regulation with it.